let's get some insight from an anti-war activist and blogger, Debar, who is in Ossining in the USA. Mr. Debar, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, the UN Security Council has met, as we just heard, to discuss a draft on the resolution to stop the bloodshed in Syria. What disagreement has the motion sparked amongst its members?
Well, it seems that the point of departure between the Western interests and Russia and China, voiced by Russia this time, is whether or not the decision about who will rule Syria is made by the Syrian people or by NATO, as it was in Libya. And this time Russia has already, and China, exercised their veto back in October. And apparently today, again, they indicated that they would not allow a resolution to go through that called for regime change in Syria without the participation of the Syrian people. It's noteworthy that, you know, the footage today of what happened in Sakba was countered by footage that you aired yourselves yesterday from Damascus with a massive pro-government rally. The people of Syria in general on the ground, according to every journalist I've spoken with that's been on the ground there, and from, you know, places like RT where you have objective, you know, reportage, the people of Syria generally back the regime. These rebellions, quote unquote, are rather small in scale, and they don't happen in multiple spots, as was reported by Ankar Kochnieva yesterday on RT. It seems that there's a roving band of people that travel with Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya news crews and sort of stage these things, and they are the, you know, backdrop for the activity at both at the Arab League and now again at the UN Security Council.
Well, you mentioned regime change as one of the goals. The wording of the resolution under discussion says President Assad has to go or face tough action. How far is the West ready to go to prove its view that it's time for the Syrian leader to get out?
Well, it depends on how far they're allowed to go. We saw how far they would go in Libya. They carried on a 7-month massive bombing campaign that reduced the infrastructure of that country to rubble, practically, which had been built up only in the last 40 years. And they installed a group of thugs that are so greedy that they're killing each other now that the government has been swept out of the way there by NATO. So they'll go as far as they're allowed to go, and it seems this time Russia and perhaps China are standing up to them.
Now, if President Assad does step down or is ousted, whichever comes first, what would it mean for a war-torn Syria?
Hopefully the model is not the same as Libya or Iraq, but most likely that's the case. When the thing that the Western powers want to see in this region is discord. They obviously cannot occupy these territories after they conquer them. If you look to Iraq and Afghanistan, you can see that that's the case. But as long as the people on the ground are busy killing each other, the United States can secure oil, or in the case of Syria, for example, the port at Tartus, which would keep Russia out of the Mediterranean, you know, whatever other objectives they have. And, you know, while the people are busy killing each other, the West is milking the place of whatever they are there to, you know, to milk it of.
Now, the resolution that is up for debate is based on the plan outlined by the Arab League earlier this week after its findings of its observer mission in Syria. They've been there for a while now. Now, the UN Security Council will be briefed about the mission's conclusions on Tuesday by the UN Secretary General. But just how much should the UN position on Syria depend on the Arab League's mission's observations in the country?
Well, first of all, the Arab League is hardly an objective observer. They have been serving the Western interests, particularly the Gulf Cooperation Council states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. I mean, if they're going to do that, first, let's send an Arab League delegation into Bahrain, where the Saudis and Qataris have propped up the regime against genuine populist uprising, and you know, let them do a report there that talks about removing, say, the U.S. Navy from the middle of that kingdom. Let's see Saudi Arabia and Qatar be examined by the Arab League or by some other international observers for their human rights records, and let's have a discussion of the entire area. Perhaps even some could come visit the United States, stop off in Guantanamo, and look at some of the things that have happened in the Congress recently with respect to civil rights, human rights, indefinite detention, and now they're looking at stripping people of their citizenship here on a declaration by the president's, the people. So
All right. Thank you very much for your observations. Don Debar, an anti-war activist and a journalist with us here on RT.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.